Here's the deal. This is a 3-day festival. It starts on Sunday, which I totally got that. Lots of things happen on a Sunday because most people are off of work. But I didn't realize that the Festas was going to go all through Monday into the early mornings. And then on Tuesday, all through the day and all through the very, very early morning. We live walking distance from the church, and we hear the DJ playing boom, 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 boom. Let me tell you about some of the fun things that we observed and saw and experienced at the Bairro Festa. The first night, Sunday night, we decided to venture out on our own and check out what this Festas was. I have to tell you, this is a very local community thing. I saw a lot of familiar faces. Literally thousands of people were there. And it was whole families coming together to eat together, to enjoy the community fellowship together. It was really, really neat to see. We're definitely the new guys on the block. Some people did acknowledge that they kind of recognized us. They knew we were like the crazy Americans who moved into the village. But then there were many people we just didn't know. I'm glad I had my experiences in Sicily, where there was a similar kind of festas. And so I kind of knew a little bit of the rhythm of how food worked. So unlike where we come from in the States, where if there's a big community event, there's a lot of food trucks. So food trucks pull in with different types of food. You know, you pick what you want and you pay for it. Well, this was like Thanksgiving on steroids with the whole community. So you would tell one guy who you could not find that guy, but you had to tell one guy your name and give him your number of people. And then you waited for him to call your name, which sounds really easy. But in the meantime, there's just hundreds of people eating full platters of food. There was lamb, there was beef stew, chicken, barbecued chicken that was really, really good. Rice and salad and chips and fruits, wine and beer and soda. It was a lot of food. And it all comes out on these big platters. So after we put our name in, it took us about an hour to get seated. And just watching the patterns and the rhythms of all of these people, all of these volunteers with all of this food. I mean, it was like a well-oiled machine. I was really impressed by that because as a business coach, I'm very curious about the inner workings of operations. How do things work? How do you keep people engaged and motivated to do something for the greater good? There were 13-year-old kids like serving drinks, and there were adults taking orders and people taking money. Like, it was a really interesting thing to watch, and I was really impressed with the amount of organization that they had for this. It was 100 degrees on Sunday night, and it was 102 degrees on Monday night. So I don't know about you, but eating a big fat meal when it's 102 degrees and there's 1,000 people there, and all of this hot food, you kind of have to like switch your head a little bit around and say, okay, I'm just gonna kind of enjoy this for what it is, right? We had a great time. We sat next to two ladies and, they didn't speak any English. We are learning Portuguese slowly. It felt genuine. It felt earthy and real. Like this is how the village parties. This is how they do it. We sat next to a couple on the other side of us, and the lady was from Angola. Now, Angola is a Lusophone country. Lusophone means that it is a former Portuguese colony in which the people today still speak a brand of Portuguese. She moved here and she opened a restaurant nearby in Fatima that specializes in both Portuguese food and Angolan food. So she was showing me all kinds of pictures of the food they make and the atmosphere. So we are definitely going to be checking out Atina's restaurant in the near future. So at one point I was waiting to pay the bill and I look over and Scott is gone. Now, Scott is wearing a bright teal blue polo shirt. This is a very Germanic looking man in a sea of Portuguese men. I could not find him. Finally, I see him walking towards me with this huge grin on his face, and he's got 2 paper bags. I knew what was in those bags. It was some kind of weird fattening dessert. And guess what? I was right. He went and found the Filhos stand, which is a fried donut that's like soaked in oil, deep fried in a vat of oil, and then dusted with sugar and cinnamon and nutmeg. And he comes over and I'm like, what is this? And he's like, it's breakfast tomorrow. You know what? Nothing makes that man happier than donuts and walking in the morning, which is probably a good combination because you really need the one to offset the other. So there's that. Guys, at over 100 degrees, I don't really understand how whole families would get out on the dance floor and dance for hours. Like, I was like just trying to catch my breath in this super busy, fun festa environment. There were people out there just dancing, having a great time. Similarly to Italy, people here in Portugal, in my observation at the Festas, really don't get trashed. Like, many of you know that I lived in Sicily for 6 months getting my dual citizenship processed. And during that time, it was over the season of Carnivale, which has some similarities to Festas here in Portugal. Well, one of the things that I observed is that people definitely drink alcohol. There is no question about it. There is wine, there is beer, there is liqueurs, but there isn't this culture of excess, even in a party setting like the Festas was. As a former owner of a wedding venue in Pennsylvania, I felt like a lot of times at a wedding, there was a sense of decorum in the wedding ceremony, but once the reception started, people let their hair down. And I felt like in most weddings that we were hosting, there was just a lot of drunkenness. You know, a lot of kids were exposed to that. A lot of little ring bearers and flower girls who were kind of involved within the context of the inner circle. They really saw this abused and celebrated. In my experience here in Europe, both for the Festas here in Portugal and the Carnivale in Italy, I felt like there just was not that expectation of over excess of alcohol. It kind of made me wonder why and how we became that way in the States. Like, when did that shift? When did it become acceptable to get trashed soon after the meal and soon after there's a couple of slow dances for the grandparents? Why is there suddenly like a veil that is taken off? No pun intended. There's just this expectation that it's perfectly acceptable to get completely drunk, you know, have a messy rest of the evening. I just don't see that here in Europe, in my experience, and I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts or opinions on that. So essentially, people are just out there, they're enjoying dancing together, they're enjoying being together after a nice meal, and the weather was just kind of secondary. Another thing that I noticed in being here and it being so hot. This is not normal for Central Portugal. I have heard literally no one complain. They might make a comment that it's warm, but there really isn't a sense of entitlement in comfort. I think comfort is viewed differently here, whether it be in the air conditioning or not air conditioning, whether it be in really uncomfortable chairs. Things are not plush here. Furniture is not plush. So, you know, for example, we have a leather couch. It's very trendy, it's very cute, but it's not necessarily comfortable. We have caned chairs in our dining room. You know, not the most comfortable things, but they suffice, they work. And I just kind of feel like we're a little higher maintenance in the States when it comes to our comfort and what we are willing to put up with than what I'm seeing here demonstrated day by day in this small village. You know, being a part of the Festas here in this very agriculture-focused small village of Portuguese people, it made me think about Pennsylvania. and the Amish country where my husband and I lived and worked and built our businesses, and how that community and this community, although very different, one is Amish and Mennonite, one is Catholic. The food is different, the way people go about what is enjoyable is different, but there's something about small town communities, how they react and relate to each other, what's important to them, the seasons, the weather, the simple life of families coming together. I found a lot more similarities than I found differences. That was really refreshing. It felt oddly comfortable. I think one thing that I'm worried about is the next generation. One of the things that one of the leaders of the Festas told me yesterday is that there's been an evolution of how the younger generation views the Festas. Like any small community event, everything is run by volunteers and by the community coming together with good organization and communication. But what's starting to happen here is that the younger generation has more options and opportunities for entertainment. They have their phones, they have movies, they have concerts. There just isn't the sense of this is the only thing. This is the expected thing for me to do. It kind of makes me wonder about what's going to happen next. If the younger generation does not value the tradition of the community, how long can these kinds of festivals, festas, carnavales, community fairs, how long can this stuff go on with volunteers in small towns? I'm almost concerned that over the next 15, 20 years, these things are just going to become memories and old videos that somebody digs up on ancient Facebook sites. Can we really, really preserve the things that we've worked so hard to build up to create solid community bonds? We'll see what happens, but that's been my experience so far. For Scott Kiefer and I, being at this Festas brought us together with the community. It helped us to connect with our neighbors, our new friends, people who are right down the street. It really helped us to really feel a little more connected to our community, our new neighbors, our new home. And I'm really grateful for that because coming here, it's not been easy. And I'm glad that I've had that opportunity. And maybe now when I pass people on the road or I go to the cafe, hopefully there'll be some kind of connection with people visually and maybe more of a trust that would be instilled because we're investing into the community around us. Hey, thank you so much for joining us, guys, and have a great day, and I'll see you next week. Ciao.